Welcome to another edition of Dan Frequently Asked Questions. In this edition, we'll be talking about atrial fibrillation and diving. Keep watching. We got a question from a diver suffering from atrial fibrillation, for which they initially had antiplatelet medication to prevent blood clots and had so-called cardioversion, in which there is a procedure, often in combination with a microwave-like disruption of the nerve pathways that improve the normal electrical conductivity to the atria and then return to normal function. So there's the ablative aspect and there's cardioversion, which essentially is like the shock that they would give if someone is in ventricular fibrillation, which is a potentially lethal condition and can shock the heart back into a normal rhythm. Now, the question was whether the individual would be able to return to diving. And I'm going to address this on two levels. The first is the coagulation risk, the clot forming risk. And the second is the heart performance and the potential risk of future complications. So let's first of all look at the issue of atrial fibrillation and the blood clotting aspect. For a person with atrial fibrillation to go onto blood clot inhibitors or warfarin or one of the agents that are used to prevent blood clotting usually implies that the atria or the upper chambers of the heart have stretched to a certain diameter in which blood clots can form in the recesses. And that is the reason for the anti-blood clot medication. So if there's already been stretching of the atria, the chances that the atrial fibrillation, firstly, will remain reversed, and secondly, that the risk of blood clots has been removed is less likely. So the chances of a permanent solution are not necessarily optimal. But I haven't got all the facts, and this is something that you would need to ask your cardiologist. The second thing is, of course, the issue of the medication itself and atrial fibrillation and diving. Now, the function of the atria, which basically preload the ventricles, which then pump the blood either into the systemic circulation to our organs and brain and heart versus to the lungs, that depends on a coordinated function of the upper and the lower heart. And when those work in synchrony, the atria can add about 30% improved output in the ventricles. So if you lose the function of the atria because of the fibrillation, you've essentially lost about 30% of your capacity to eject blood from the heart, and therefore you have reduced exercise capacity. So exercise capacity would be a significant consideration, on top of which being in water adds additional blood volume into the heart, which may compromise heart function and even precipitate cardiac failure. As far as the medication is concerned, some of the modern antiplatelet drugs are quite safe, and there are a number of pilots and divers that continue their activities without significant restrictions. If that is the case and there are no concerns that the cardiac function is going to decompensate, it may very well be possible for you to return to diving. However, having said that, it would be important to start the diving with very, very benign conditions and with people who are prepared and able to provide immediate support if there were to be decompensation during a dive. So don't go doing deep cold water dives or extremely strenuous dives, long swims, until you've literally found your heart again in diving and you're able to know how effective you are in terms of exercising and diving as such and being immersed in water. Thank you for the question, an interesting one. And until next time, safe diving to you all.